Okay, all set up. Hello. Thank you so much for joining us tonight, Shankari.
You're so welcome. I'm sorry I can't be there in person, and I'm sorry it sounds a bit. Tell me if the sound quality is okay?
No, it sounds nice and clear.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, excellent.
Yes, it's a bit of a long drive from Sydney to Albany, isn't it?
It is, but I was there for the Perth Writers Festival recently in WA, and I must say I just enjoyed myself so much. So I'm keen to come back and explore a bit more.
Excellent. Yes, well, we will have you.
Thank you very much.
So I'd just like to begin with the acknowledgement of country. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of this land, the Menang people. They've looked after this beautiful Noongar Budja for thousands of years, and we are so privileged to live here, learn here, and gather here today to discuss stories. I'd also like to acknowledge elders, past, present, and emerging. Shankari, so you're joining us from Sydney today?
Actually, I'm joining you from Palawa country. I'm in Tasmania, and in Hobart right now. So yes, I had to check that there was no special time difference for Hobart from Sydney. So I'm excellent at miscalculating time zones.
We've all got our skills. That's right. I once missed a flight because of that.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was very stressful. I've never made that mistake again. Alrighty, so we always like to begin by quickly explaining the setup. So you can only see me here, but what we've got is you on a lovely big screen TV so that our gorgeous audience can see you. So yeah, sorry if I sort of pivot between the two. And the other thing we like to start with is to hear a little bit about what young Shankari was like and what her relationship to reading was.
Okay, I saw that question. It made me laugh, and still makes me laugh. Only because I'm in Hobart because I'm turning 50 this week, and so it feels like a while since I was, a little girl. But I mean, I was probably the same as everyone in the room. I loved reading. Was quite obsessive as a reader, and even as recently as last year, would be known to leave functions early so that I could go home and finish reading my book. And I would make up some ridiculous excuse about something very parental and important that I had to do. So I was an obsessive reader and was always happiest in a library or talking about books with my best friend. I have a best friend called Kate Kelly from school, and we have read books together for decades. And have always, sort of urgently called each other to debrief on whatever we're reading. And then I have a book club at the moment, and they fulfill. It's taken 7 women to replace Kate Kelly. Don't tell Kate Kelly. Actually, she'd be really offended by that. And both Kate Kelly and my book club get Easter egged in all of my novels because they have such an important role in my reading life. And I think all of you will be the same. It's just, it's something that you share with people, right? The book that you choose to give friends is very important. The books that you receive that your friends have chosen for you are so important. And the conversations that I have around books with people, often, actually, sometimes, well, not often, but sometimes strangers, you'd sit down and see someone reading something that you love, and I can't help myself. I have to just turn to them and go, oh my God, it's amazing, isn't it? So yeah, I from a very young age, that was me and books, and it was a big part of my internal life as well. So I was always thinking about story inspired by the books I was reading at the time, and I had a very active inner life as a child.
Yeah, I am not shy about going up to someone on the street and being like, oh my God, wait until you get to the end. This is how you make book friends, right? Or they, avoid you. But, it doesn't happen that often.
or get your photo up at the local Coles as a stalker. So, one or the other.
Exactly. It's a 50-50, and those are odds I'm willing to take.
That's right.
So how did you come to writing? Was that drawn from your love of reading?
I think, yes, in part. I certainly, even as a young reader, I remember journaling and reading the Diary of Anne Frank and thinking, diary keeping is a way to go. And I remember when I was in fifth grade, I had this fabulous teacher. You know how everyone has that teacher that changes their life. Mine was a fifth grade teacher, Mrs. Vandermark, who, in fact, the library in Chinatown at Cinnamon Gardens is named after her. And she used to give us a brick of computer paper. We'll remember computer paper. And it had these perforations on the side. And she would give everyone a brick of computer paper and say to them, when you go on holiday, keep a holiday journal. And the bricks are this thick. And she would give me 2 bricks and say, just keep writing. So she could tell that I loved to write. And I think for a long time, I thought I had a big book in me, as many people do, and just never had the courage to give it a go until we left London to migrate to Australia. And on the plane over, it's a lot of detail, I'll wrap this up in a moment. On the plane over from London to Sydney, when we were returning home, because Australia is my home, I was watching this movie called Julie and Julia, where she learns to blog about food, and the protagonist. And she says this one line, she says, I can write. I've got words, I can write it. It's something like that. And I was thinking, I can write too. I've got words. I love words. And so I just started to blog, and the blogging gave me confidence. The blogging actually helped me. It was almost like an online journal to help me understand migration back to Australia, which I had found very hard because Australia was not what I remembered it to be. And I felt really alienated in my own home country. And so blogging is essentially, I grew more confident in my voice, and then thought, let me give that big book a go. And it'll just be one. It'll be the first and only book I write. And, it'll just be for me and the children. But of course, as the writers in the room will know, once you start, you can't stop. And that particular novel was a real adjudication of the human rights abuses and the war in Sri Lanka. That was Song of the Sun God. And I realized at a certain point that I wasn't just writing it for my children, and that I wanted a wider audience to understand what had happened to the Tamil people in the final stages of the war, and indeed there's the sort of 100-year history that took them towards war. And so I kept pushing and pushing and pushing to learn to write, which is a craft, which again, all the writers in the room will know, is a craft that is improved with learning and teaching and reading and pulling things apart and practicing. And then I eventually sort of got to that stage of being able to publish that first book. And then, of course, after that, I could never stop. So I just kept going.
Excellent. And did you have any sort of, like you were saying, where it's a craft that you hone over time, did you have any mentorship opportunities? We spoke to Charlene Alsop, who I think you've done a talk with, I think maybe.
Yeah, yes.
Yeah, both fantastic Ultimo authors. So, and yeah, she had like a mentorship opportunity. Did you have anything like that?
Yeah, so I did one, I think similar to hers. Hers might have been with ASA. And I had a mentorship with ASA as well, whereby a writer read my manuscript that I was working on at the time and gave me really constructive feedback over a period of 12 months. And that was very helpful. I also did a writing course down at my local community centre, because we have, at the time when I was writing my first book, I had a very young family, and I've always found sort of getting out beyond my neighbourhood, although I'm in Hobart today, getting out beyond my actual neighbourhood quite challenging at times. And so the local course was incredible. I ended up meeting a group of, I think I actually brought the average age down to 60 or something. There was just this really experienced group of women in the room who'd lived so many extraordinary lives between them. And they were all multidisciplinary artists who now thought they'd give novel writing a go, now that they'd exhibited art in New York or something. And so I learned so much from them and from this teacher about the actual craft of writing, and that process of reading your work out loud, that process of opening yourself up to critique, and then the hard graft of I had to put my ego aside, and there was not much left of my self-esteem by that point anyway, and just keep going through the manuscript and editing and trying to challenge each word to be better.
Yeah. And now you've got a heap under your belt.
Got a
Heap of
few,
novels
yes.
across the genres. Have you found, and obviously you are the incredibly well-deserved winner of the Miles Franklin Award for 2023. You made me cry with Chai Time. I was devastated, and I'm not over it. How have you found the process of writing? Obviously, I know you would have been writing other stuff before that was even published, much less won all the accolades. Have you found that your approach to writing has changed since winning that award?
That's a good question. The current novel that's out, Safe Haven, as soon as I'd finished writing, or as soon as I had handed Chai Time at Cinnamon Gardens over to my publisher, which is that really wonderful period where he's accepted it, I've handed it over. He hasn't actually done a structural edit on it yet, so I still think he thinks it's good, and so nothing's come back to me yet. And I've got this period where I can now choose to just, binge watch Succession, or I could. Which I tried once and was really disturbing, or I could write another novel. And so I said, I'm going to start my next novel, Robert from Ultimo, I hope that's okay. And he was really supportive of that. And so I ended up finishing the second draft, I think, of Safe Haven before the shortlist was out for the Miles Franklin. And wonderfully, I'd actually forgotten about the Miles Franklin, which has never happened, right? I've never forgotten about the Miles Franklin. But I hadn't been longlisted for anything for Chai Time at Cinnamon Gardens. And so I just assumed it was not an award-winning novel and stopped paying attention to that sort of cadence of award submissions and so on. So when Robert called me the first time to say I'd been longlisted, and, he was in tears, I was like, are you kidding me? This is a really mean joke, Robert. It had really kind of passed me by. Yeah. So the writing for Safe Haven was completely without self-consciousness, because I had no awareness that Chai Time at Cinnamon Gardens would go on to sell, or let alone be nominated for anything. So it was that's a lovely way in which to write. And I'm about to start my new manuscript. And for the most part, I don't think about the outside world. Once I start writing, I definitely have some jitters. I have to be honest with you, I've definitely got some jitters, because this is really the first time I'm putting pen to paper with the full knowledge of the award and all that it has given me over the last 12 months. And in fact, this Thursday, I go to the award ceremony to present the next Miles Franklin to the next winner.
Oh, that'd be such a beautiful experience. Yeah.
Yeah. Look, I feel really, really excited for them, whoever they are. And honoured to be a part of the ceremony. So that's exciting. So I do get a bit jittery when I think about sitting down to write my next novel, but I've got quite a clear sense of where I want to start with that and some of the big themes that I want to explore. And so I actually have been saying to my husband, I've got to start before I turn 50, which is like in 2 days or something ridiculous. And so tomorrow morning I will be getting up and I will be putting pen to paper, these weird superstitions that you have. Yeah.
We like arbitrary deadlines. You got to set them sometimes. Totally. Like in 5 minutes, I will get up and do the dishes. But not right now. It has to be 4 o'clock evenly.
I get you. Multiples of 4 are my favorite.
And I'd also like to speak on, you've already mentioned Song of the Sun God. I saw that is being adapted for, was it a movie or a TV show?
TV show. We're looking at a 6-part TV show. Yes.
Yeah. Oh, how exciting is that? And are you part of that production?
Yes, I'm part of the writer's room. It's still very much in development. So TV is, one of those things where so much work gets optioned for television. But even that is, they're not optioning willy-nilly, but there's certainly a lot of content that gets optioned. And then of that content that gets optioned, there's just a fraction of it that gets made. And so I'm at that period where we've raised just over 50% of the funding and are still looking for the last sort of 40%, and have a really good team. and a huge amount of credibility with my children because I just keep dropping the word television. And one of the leads, or the lead, is Shankari Chandran from Bridgerton, which is really very exciting to everybody in the family. Yeah. And, well, we've just signed for Chai Time at Cinnamon Gardens with a great producer. And actually this evening I was talking to a potential writer for the project. And my suspicion is that Chai Time at Cinnamon Gardens will get up faster than Song of the Sun God. Yeah. Because Chai Time at Cinnamon Gardens, I'd actually been in development for Song of the Sun God for a number of years. And I'd learned a lot from the project. I'd learned a lot from the challenges of developing and adapting it. So when I sat down to write Song of the Sun God, I genuinely thought it would never get published because my third manuscript had not found a publisher. But I also by then knew that stories, even unpublished stories, got optioned. Yeah. So I thought, well, if Chai Time at Cinnamon Gardens, even if it doesn't get published, if it were to be optioned for television, what does that, what would that look like? And so I've always had that in the back of my mind. Yeah. And I feel like we've got a better chance with Chai Time at Cinnamon Gardens than Song of the Sun God right now, just because of the nature of sweeping epic across 7 decades and 4 generations and 3 continents versus a book set in a nursing home in Western Sydney. Yeah, I think we can manage that.
Yeah. Oh, wow. You have so many plates in the air at the moment. And
yeah, it's good
also
fun.
A lawyer as well.
Yeah.
How do you find that your work and your background influences your writing?
So much. At the moment, for the last 3 years, I've been working in a sustainability role for a corporate retailer, which seems a bit random for me, and it does actually make sense, but we don't have enough time for me to explain why that makes sense. It is about creating social change within an organization, and in particular, improving our footprint on the planet. And so that work, if anything, makes me just want to write apocalypse fictions, because all I'm reading about is the potential sort of end of the world, depletion of resources, climate change. It's all coming to a fiery end soon. So there's an element of that. But in the years prior to that, I worked in the human rights space and social justice. And so I used to take 2 notepads to meetings, because I'd have a notepad where I'd be taking notes on the meeting, and then a notepad where if something kind of really spoke to me creatively, I would write that down in the second notepad. Because so much of what my fiction explores is injustice, and particularly from the Sri Lankan perspective, that dispossession, colonization, forced migration, and the creation of home. And the justice issues within that were things that I was addressing or looking at in my career as a lawyer.
Well, speaking of that process then, what was the spark for Safe Haven?
Yeah, good question again. So when I moved back from London to Australia in end of 2009, I did find the sort of rhetoric around asylum seekers and refugees, and this idea of an invasion of immigrants, really, and because it was all conflated, right? All of that narrative was really had converged into one very alarmist narrative that definitely felt xenophobic, but was carefully constructed using the language of border security. And I found that really troubling. But I had so many things that were troubling me at the time that my literary response to that, to what I was feeling at the time, was Song of the Sun God. That was me trying to write my way back home to Australia. But the idea of, what are we thinking and what are we feeling when we create offshore detention centers and when we execute these policies that are so inhumane, and when we villainize people seeking refuge? What's going on in the Australian mind, in the politicians' mind? Who are they speaking to? Whose votes are they trying to get when they do this? So that was sort of playing in my mind for a number of years. And then the Biloela family was forcibly removed from their home. And there were a few incidents like that. There'd been a number of really terrible tragedies in other parts of the world with ships or boats. They're not even ships really, they're just dilapidated boats. And I'd read a beautiful memoir by a lady called Ali Kaur, who works for the Rural Association for Refugees and is based in Apollo Bay, country Victoria, on the coast. And she wrote a memoir with her adopted son, a Sri Lankan Tamil refugee who had ended up on Christmas Island. And it's called The Power of Good People. And I'd read that memoir, and the thing about that memoir and about the Biloela family's story is that aside from both the Biloela family, so Priya and Nadesalingam, and Bay story, were really strong self-advocates. So they were really resilient, refused to go quietly, were determined to fight for themselves. And they had a community of actual strangers, really, who'd got to know them over 4 years and had brought them into their community and felt like they were family, but had started off as strangers, people who had the goodness and generosity to invite them into their lives and were now willing to fight for them and then to mobilize a national campaign. And so I was fascinated by this. And I thought, well, we have these policies and politicians and clearly a part of the population that those policies connect with. But then we have these other people around Australia, these rural communities that are advocating for something much better. And let me think about them. Let me elevate that story. And so that's where Safe Haven started.
Amazing. And I'd like to speak to the title as well. Mm-hmm. Because when I was looking into it, it is, I forget which page number it was, I wrote it down, page 9 or something like that, where you reference the visa that Athena is on while she's there. Was that based on research? Was it based on your background in law that you'd come across sort of that specific visa?
Yeah, so it was based on research because I'm not an immigration lawyer, and immigration law and asylum law in Australia is deliberately confusing. I mean, the entire system is designed to make you fail, right, and to make you give up, and if just accept the fate that's thrust upon you. And so I really struggled with trying to understand the different visas and the different processes, and was fortunate to have friends that worked in immigration and could explain it to me. But, what would you do if English was your second, third, fourth language and you didn't have access to lawyers or help? And one of the visas that I had researched and had been explained to me was the Safe Haven visa. And that actually it worked for what I needed from Sister Fina's storyline. And so I gave her the Safe Haven visa. And I had named the book, I had given it the working title, Anbu, because I just need a name for the Word document that sits on my desktop. And so Anbu means love in Tamil. And when I then gave the book to the publisher, to Robert from Ultimo, I didn't even think about a potential title. I just, I was like, here, you do something with this. And he came back with Safe Haven. So he's pretty good at his job. He came back with Safe Haven. And I was like, of course, that's the title. And then he used the same artist, Jess Cruikshank, that he'd used for the Australian edition of Song of the Sun God and Chai Time at Cinnamon Gardens. And she's a beautiful, talented artist. So you'll see that all three books sort of fit together in their own way.
Absolutely stunning, the artwork. And the continuity is fantastic. Sometimes don't have that, and they look better on the shelf when they all match.
I do like a bit of matching.
Yeah, exactly. And that's something that I've absolutely loved hearing as well as we've been doing these interviews, is how collaborative the process of writing can be. It's not just you huddled at a desk, red eyes because you've had 12 Red Bulls and you're just frantically trying to tap it out before you got to, your annual leave finishes and you've got to get back to your 9 to 5. How have you found that the collaborative process has changed over the years from having these fantastic manuscripts that haven't been picked up yet to now probably having them have anything that you send through on high alert?
Yeah, that's very kind. I'm not sure I will ever have the confidence to think that. But I do feel so fortunate, right? Because Robert at Ultimo is a real collaborator, and I feel like I have a partner in my creative life. Like I kind of quietly joke that he's my second husband because I have this sort of partner in my other life, and then I've got this partner in my creative life, and both lives are very important. I won't suggest that one's more important than the other. And Robert and I can test ideas with him and it feels like a very safe space. And he knows me and what I care about, what I think about, and is really able to have those conversations with me. Um, and and then I feel that if I was to send him something, my view on publishing contracts is, and when I was an emerging writer, I would look at writers who received publishing contracts, where they'd get 3 publishing contracts, they'd be signed for 3 books. And I would look at them with such envy because I didn't even have 1 publishing contract, let alone being offered 3 in a group by a publisher. And with my most recent contracts with Robert, he just asked me, can I give you 3, and I went back to him and to my agent and just said, actually, I don't want the pressure of being committed to that. If Robert will sign me for 1, then I'll try really hard and produce something that I'm proud of. And if it's not good enough, then Robert will help me make it better. And if once it is good enough to sit on a shelf amongst other Australian writers and other global writers, then it will be published. And then once that's done, we'll think about the next one. And they were all okay with that. So that was good.
That's fantastic. It's amazing how once you're in that room, the idealization of it and the reality of it can change when it's for your journey. We haven't heard anything like that yet. So thank you so much for sharing that.
Okay.
Speaking of writing process, I would love to know, are you in a hermetically sealed chamber when you write? Do you have chaos going on around you? Paint us a picture of your setup.
Okay, so right now I'm in a bathroom in a hotel in Hobart.
Amazing.
And my husband was gone down to the bar because he was going to try and watch a Hercule Poirot film. And I said to him, you can try, but you know that I get excited. And so which means I get louder and louder. So he's gone. And yeah, I mean, what's not to love about talking about books? So my writing, I would love to be hermetically sealed. God, one day. And I have this game that I play with myself, which is whenever I go to different places, I'm like, oh, could this be my next, my future writer's retreat, when I have the kind of life where I could do a writer's retreat? And so definitely settled upon Bruny Island, I think. And not just because I have a mind crush on Richard Flanagan. But so my writing process will be, it used to be until very recently, until last week, it was that I would write on a Friday. And then once I started a novel, and I do 4 sprints a week. So I will say to myself, I'll get up early, or it might be late, but I'm not very good at sort of late in the day. I would get up early and say to myself, I've just got 20 minutes to write and no pressure, just write 100 words chunks, and that's all you've got to do. And the reason that I do that for myself is, firstly, no pressure. And secondly, most importantly, it keeps me connected to my world, so that I'm still kind of ticking over the story in my mind. I'm putting words down on a page. The world is still alive and my mind is primed, so that by Friday, which is my writing day, which is sacred, I am ready. So I can step back into that world more easily, and I have a sense of what's about to happen, as opposed to starting cold if I've not thought about it or had any access, to sit down and write. And then something very important for me, which is, it kind of sounds crazy, but I think you guys will appreciate it. On a Thursday night when I go to bed, before my writing day, I will, as I'm going to sleep, actually just close my eyes and ask my characters, what are you going to do tomorrow? So that they and I are working together, and I'm sitting in a room with them and they're showing me, and I'm just writing it down. I'm not making it up. I'm just writing down what I'm seeing. And they know that I'm approaching them with curiosity and humility.
I love that. Collaboration again.
Yeah, that's right. It's collaboration again. And so this novel, I've actually just asked my business to kind of demote me effectively, which makes me feel very nervous for the first time in my life, my career. I would like to take a step back from my corporate career and give more time to my writing. And so I'm shifting jobs within the business that I work for so that I can write 2.5 days a week, or 2 days, at least 2, but probably closer to 3. And that's going to start soon.
Well, congratulations. That's an incredibly exciting step.
Thank you very much. Thanks.
Change is always scary, isn't it? Even when you know it's a good thing.
Yeah, it is, right? And I wanted this, but I'm still, slightly on edge. And in terms of collaboration, I mean, for this new novel, the new idea that I've got, I've obviously brainstormed it with my publisher to say, what do you think about this idea? But I've been having lots of really fun chats with my husband, with my children, and with my cousins. And I think I mentioned Kate Kelly earlier. I'll be calling Kate Kelly shortly. It's actually felt a lot more collaborative than it has in the past. In the past, I'll kind of write 10,000 words and emerge from the agony and the ecstasy and then discuss it. But this time, because there's so much within this manuscript that's very challenging for me intellectually, I feel the need to talk about it with my people and kind of be challenged and have my mind expanded by the things that they know and think as well.
That's amazing. Thank you. I love that. Yeah, it's that whole community aspect as well, isn't it? Same as what we have in this room. Aww. I am always fascinated as well to know, are you able to read while you're in the process of writing? Because it sounds like you're pretty much always writing. No, I can't do it.
Yeah, can't do it. Not very well. I will just about be able to read the book club book. And that's because I'm slightly afraid of my book club. I love them. Don't get me wrong, I love them. But if you break the social contract of not reading your book club book, it's not right.
Exactly.
So, yeah. So I will read my book club book.
Yes.
But once I start writing and really writing in earnest, I have to stop.
Yeah. And just warn them in advance so you can avoid their wrath.
Yes, that's it. Yeah, no, well, I'll read the book club book, but it gets hard when I get friends who want me to read their books to potentially provide an endorsement.
Yeah.
And I'll end up saying yes with this book. But there'll be a part of me that's like, oh God.
Why did I do that?
I know. And I love to read my friends' work, right? I mean, yeah. It's fantastic. It's a great opportunity.
100 hours in a day.
Wow, this is it. Just one more day in the week would be enough.
Yeah. And another thing that I'm incredibly nosy about is I love finding about the backstory for people's epigraphs. I love finding that out. And you have a gorgeous quote, "She fades to the back pages," from Christine Chamista's Soft Side of Red. Can you speak to us a bit about that?
Yes, so Christine Chamista is an emerging writer and poet of Sri Lankan Tamil heritage, and I love her work. I have read a lot of her unpublished work, and this is her first published anthology of poetry or collection of poetry. And this line, and a lot of what she writes about is the Sri Lankan Tamil experience and navigating two worlds. And there was this line in a poem that was, "She fades to the back pages," which is obviously, as you say, what I've used, because I feel like Sister Fina and all of those people that are put away in, whether it be offshore detention centers or even the onshore detention centers, are deliberately placed out of sight and out of mind, and that they are in those places of horror, really, and that the government does not want us to think about them. It doesn't want us to care for them. It doesn't want us to feel for them. It doesn't want us to advocate for change. And Fina in Safe Haven is both like that, in that sense that the government is deliberately trying to erase her humanity by where it places her in an offshore detention center. And at the same time, she is
into the toilet bowl.
Also, I know, so lucky. At the same time, she's also the trajectory of her own emancipation involves her always trying to disappear. Throughout the novel, she's always trying to fade away. And so those words really connected with me for Fina. And then the inscription for N is my brother. So Narendran Nadana Chandran, our surname is actually Nadana Chandran. So for NNC is for him, and from Anbu then means with love in Tamil, in our ancestral language. And then it's from SNC, who's me, Shankari Chandran. And there's a running joke between my brother and myself that he has not read the final drafts of all of my books, or, I mean, he's read it, bits and pieces. And so it's just an ongoing thing that I get to tease him about. And so with this one, it's like, if I dedicate it to you, surely you'll read it.
You have to read it.
Yes. And he's a sweet boy. He did read it recently and then called me to say that he is so sorry he hadn't read it earlier and that he hadn't realized how talented I was. And then he was like, no, but I've always known that. But it's just that I just hadn't realized just that, the writing. And then he started crying because he couldn't say anything else. So, yeah. I think he made up for years of not reading my novels. Yeah, good recovery, right? Good recovery.
Were the twins in Chai Time inspired by your relationship with your brother?
Yeah. For sure. The way that those two talk to each other is very much the way that my brother and I talk to each other. We have sort of this kind of internal jokes and shorthands and yeah, for sure.
I love that. Yeah, my sisters are the same. We natter away and half of it does not make sense because it's all sort of inside references. Everyone else thinks we're crazy.
Yeah. Do you find each other really funny?
Oh, yeah. We are hilarious.
Yeah. See, my brother and I are the same. We find each other really, really funny. So, and, I think you need that in a sibling.
Yeah. My poor brother-in-law, I've got two sisters and he's the only boy, so he's very outnumbered, and we all go to her house and we're cackling away. Poor thing, he ends up leaving after a while because he just gotta just let the sisters
have a drink with her.
Another thing that I'd like to speak to is how the novel starts. So the sort of prologue for the novel is the transcript from the emergency call from the sinking boat that Fina is on. Can you speak a bit around how that format, how you decided on that format to sort of open the novel?
Yeah, for sure. So I actually read the, I don't know if it's in the opening pages, I don't think it is, of the memoir. You'll remember that I mentioned this lady called Ali Cork, who lives in Apollo Bay, country Victoria, who's adopted and helped a young refugee navigate Christmas Island in the immigration system and effectively has adopted him. So he calls her mum. And in fact, I've been talking to I call her Auntie Ali. And I've been talking to Auntie Ali for years now. And she knew that I was developing Safe Haven, and she gets a mention. She and Para are acknowledged in the back of the book. And I went to Apollo Bay for their literary festival on the weekend and met her face to face for the first time. And when you meet someone, it was so beautiful. You meet someone that you've never actually physically been in a room with, but your family already. It was really special. And I got to meet so many members of the Apollo Bay community. And I mean, this community, literally, they are sponsoring 7 families in Afghanistan. They're advocating, they're writing to their politicians, their MPs. It's just a really special place and an unusual community, but I'd like to believe there's more people like that. And in their memoir, they wrote this memoir together called The Power of Good People, Auntie Ali and Para. And in that, there is a transcript from the rescue of Para's small boat by a Norwegian tanker. And Auntie Ali and Para have remained dear friends with the Norwegian captain. And I found that so inspiring. And it really stayed with me. It stayed with me for years because I read that memoir years ago. And I knew that I wanted to begin with both the horror of it and the heroism.
And those connections in the book, they hold you so close to it as well. You just care for the characters so much. So I love that you included that, because I loved Magnus, and I loved the ongoing dialogue that he had with Fina. It was beautiful.
Yeah, me too. Thank you. I enjoyed watching that unfold.
Yes. Yeah. Do you find that you see it all ahead of time, or is it, as you know, that Thursday night when you go, okay, what are we gonna say tomorrow? Is it more that?
Yeah. I would definitely have moments during the week when I'm writing where something will come to me. I'll go, I know what you're going to do. Yes, I see that. But often on a Friday morning, if I've done my sprints and I'm primed and ready, then the Friday morning, it's almost like watching television. It's like closing my eyes and watching television inside my mind. And that's the most joyous writing, because there's nothing labored about it. And there's many parts of writing that are labored, as they probably should be. And I think all of us that love to write are up for that, right? We know it happens. We know that we've got to put the work in. And then there are these other moments where the universe rewards you, and the characters are doing what they're doing, and you just get to put words around that.
Oh, that's beautiful. One thing that I'd like to read out was a quote from page 23, if everyone's got their books with them.
Mm-hmm.
Fina could only speak 3 languages: Tamil, the language of her parents; Sinhala, the language of her oppressors; and English, the language of her colonizers. But now she understood the words for the not knowing in many more languages. She even knew it without words. And within the story as well, there's a reference with the library, how it's really important for people to have access to stories that are within their own language. And I wanted to sort of speak to how you explore how language can be used as a weapon, how it can be used to disempower people. Earlier you referenced how when someone is their 3rd or 4th language, moving to a new place, and what that's sort of like, and how you explore that in your stories.
Yeah, I mean, we could do a whole session on that, right? I think, and all of us will love words, will love language, and feel that it is profoundly powerful for good and for evil in the way that it can be used to use those sort of simplistic binaries. In Sri Lanka, the Tamil language was demoted effectively in the 50s, and it was taken away from the status of national language and made a secondary language within the country, which then meant that everyone who spoke Tamil as a first language and English, if they didn't speak Sinhalese, the language of the majority ethnic group, then they were not able to gain employment within the civil service. Was the largest employer at the time. It just had a series of knock-on effects for education, employment, and therefore economic participation. And the Tamil language is, I think we're all very proud of our language. We just don't realize that we are, because it's never been challenged, and we've never had the threat of the language being taken away from us. English has never been, no one has ever tried to take English away from me. It's my first language, and I take it for granted that I can walk anywhere, in the world actually, and speak it. And I try not to walk anywhere in the world and speak it. I try hard to speak the language of the place, but I know that no one will ever try to take my language away from me. Whereas for people in Sri Lanka, and as you'll know, for First Nations communities around Australia, their languages were criminalized. They were thrown in prison for trying to speak their language, and the children were forcibly made to give up their languages and to assimilate and to adopt English. And so there's such power in taking away of language. And then there's such power in claiming language and the way that we think and feel in the first language that we're taught. And I don't have my ancestral language, right? English is my first language, and my parents made a choice to speak to us in English so that we would integrate into Australia better, because they'd come just after the White Australia policy had ended. They were very keen. They'd come from a background where language could be weaponized against you. Your mother tongue could be weaponized against you. If you were different, that would be weaponized against you. Education was seen as the only way to safety and security and freedom. And so they wanted us to speak English flawlessly. And so they speak 3 languages and gave us 1. And so I have a sense of loss and grief around that, because so much of culture and spirituality and religion is actually passed through in the Tamil language. And so what I'm receiving is not a sanitized version of it, but it's still an interpreted version of it. So I have a sense of loss around that. And I'm always trying to, in a way, my own relationship with that language is to venerate it in English language, but with references to, with recognition of what it is and what it should have or could have been in my life, but what it is to so many.
And the way that it connects to home as well. That's something that you explore a lot in your stories. And you've mentioned how Australia is home. You'd moved away for a while, and coming back, it wasn't the home that you remembered as well. And that's something that I feel like you explore with, I think, all of your novels too. Could you speak to how you attempt to portray the different kinds of displacement as well, not necessarily just physical?
Yeah, I think, in each novel, there's definitely, if I was to, when you're doing arts grants, there's sort of funding applications, you have to summarize your creative vision. Who are you as a writer? And so sort of my least favorite task is to write grant applications. But the process is actually very, very helpful, because I realized at some point that I am always writing about dispossession, and the relationships that we form or the communities that we build as a result of it. And that was kind of a revelation moment for me, because it was a sort of a sense of owning what it is that I want to explore and accepting it, and also allowing myself to go outside that whenever I want to go outside that, because that's not a confine. It's just the thing that always pulls me to the page, is that issue. And so my characters are genocide, by genocide, it's a really inappropriate moment to drop the phone, by migration systems, and then when they find safety, or they're searching for safety and home, there's still displacement and dispossession within that, because they're starting all over again. And so, and it isn't just the sort of physical, we were dispossessed within Sri Lanka for a long time before we had to leave. And so there's a dispossession of rights and identity and sovereignty that takes place before you are physically dispossessed and forcibly moved. And so all of my characters in each of my novels, I think, and even in the science fiction, the dystopic one, The Barrier, there's a real, people are disconnected from religion, and therefore completely dispossessed of the thing that anchored them to themselves. So it's a really important theme for me that I keep coming back to. I'll have a think. I won't tell you now, just because I haven't thought through my next project, which I will begin writing tomorrow. But I will ask myself tomorrow, have I once again gone back into dispossession, but through different issues?
Yeah. And with just what you're talking about there with writing your characters, do you find that you gravitate to one particular character? It felt like Safe Haven, we had Fina, but we also had Lucky as really, strong characters who, had their own storylines. Did you kind of have a favourite, or was your love fair and equal?
Yes, I love all my children equally.
Of course.
Actually, I really like to play them off against each other. With Safe Haven, originally, both Lucky and Fina were meant to share the stage equally. And when I finished the first draft, so Lucky was as much, she had as much sort of airtime, as it were, as Fina. My book club said, I know you think that this is an equal story between the two of them, but got to tell you, I think that Fina is the star of the show. And I was like, you don't know what you're talking about. And, I didn't say that out loud, but inside I was like, don't say that. That can't be right. because I've worked so hard to create two fully realized, strong women who are different from each other, but will somehow, support each other and get to know themselves better. And then I sent it to Robert, and he came back to me and he said, "Don't hate me, but actually, this is Fina's novel." And so think about it through that lens. Think about what it would hate it in that way, and give Fina the story that she is claiming for herself anyway. What does that novel look like? I was like, God damn it, I hate you all. And then I just went, and started over, and I didn't sort of scrap what I'd written. I took the 100,000 words and said, okay, what does that look like? And produced what I feel is a much better novel. I feel really proud of it, and at ease. Like, I feel at peace with Fina, and Fina's at peace with me now that I did what she was asking. And so she is the central character, and Lucky is the person that enables her and works with her, and enables her storyline effectively. And then in Chai Time at Cinnamon Gardens, actually Ruben and Maya were both talking to me, and both in my mind for a very long time. And so for me, they were the emotional axis of that novel. And everybody else I consciously created, whereas Ruben and Maya had been in my mind, just kind of going, look, what can we do together? And everybody else was consciously created to facilitate the story.
So there were some big darlings that you had to kill there.
Yeah. Oh God, it was so painful.
Oh, and they were right, and I bet they rubbed that in too.
I'm gracious enough to do it quietly.
Next time they won't be so humble. They're like, no, we were right, so just trust us. Now, we don't have too much longer to go, and I know that we have some audience questions. So what I'd love is are you able to read us out a passage? Do you have a copy with you?
Oh, I don't have a copy. I'm so sorry.
Okay. That is totally fine.
That I didn't go on a romantic week away with my husband with my own novel. Yes, thank you.
I can't believe you. You need to get writing the next one, so you've got one to tote around. Say, darling, listen to this.
Yeah, that's right. He'll be like, oh God, not again.
Let me watch my Agatha Christie in peace. Well, that's okay, because I know that we do have plenty of audience questions.
Okay, good. And I'm sorry, I should have been better prepared.
That's okay. If you wouldn't mind making sure that's turned on. So we've got a microphone which does not make you loud. What it does is it captures it on the recording. So you will still need to use your theatre voice to really spread that out so that Shankari can hear you. Who would like to go first? Show of hands.
Thank you so much for your time. It's been really, really interesting and fabulous.
You're so welcome. Thank you for having me.
I'm Catherine, and I have a background in human rights and identity formation research. And I'm really curious to hear, you've talked about Apollo Bay and the community and how they're very kind of unique and stand out to you for their compassion. And my question to you, I have my own theories based on my own work previously, but what do you think is the kernel that opens up some people's minds to compassion and how that, and not to, and to kind of fear it? Big question.
It is a big question, and it's a really good one, because I've been talking a lot about compassion lately and thinking a lot about compassion. And while I think that Apollo Bay, I mean, I met them now, right? I've been there in the community briefly, and I was utterly blown away, even more so than I was before I met them. I would like to believe, and I do think that there are Australians all around the country that are capable of that, right? So the Rural Australians for Refugees is a really big organisation around Australia that does the same thing that Apollo Bay is doing. And I suppose I say all that just so that I reassure myself it isn't just, they're not an aberration, because I need to believe that to get up in the morning and to know that one day I won't be here anymore and that my children might still be okay. And I've been thinking a lot about compassion, because I went to and I hope I don't offend anybody by saying this, and please don't quote me. In fact, I'll just keep the name out of it. I went to an event recently where at the table next to me were Mr. Dutton, Mr. Abbott, and Mr. Howard. And I thought, wow, are you capable of compassion? Like, I was actively thinking that question. Are there people that are devoid of compassion? And in answer to your question, what is the kernel of compassion? What is it that enables some to feel it and others to not? Honestly, it's a terrible answer, because the answer is I don't actually know. And I feel like my literary work is often a journey trying to understand it, both compassion and resilience. Why is it that some people are able to survive terrible things and some are not? And why is it that some people can feel enough and care enough to look after others and some cannot or do not? And I feel like a big part of my literary journey and life is to explore those things. And I would welcome if there's any time for you to tell me your thoughts on that question that you asked to me, particularly as you've been studying very interesting things.
Thank you so much for your answer. It was really interesting. For me, there's many different components that can feed into identity and who we think we are. And I think just from my own experiences, I worked for a while on the Thai-Burmese border as a human rights journalist and experienced some quite shocking things. I think that it's born out of fear. That to me, that is it's the fear of letting go of your own identity and absorbing something else that is unknown to you. And there's many other factors and conditions and circumstances that feed into that. But I think a lot of human behavior is grounded in fear.
Yeah. And I remember Richard Flanagan saying once, he said, we was talking about First Nations people, and he said, we have a choice in the way that we face into the future. We can either do so with fear, or we can recognize that we are on this land that holds this ancient, powerful, and resilient communities, plural, First Nations peoples, and we can learn from what they have to offer and not think of them as something from the past, but rather the answer to the future. And that we can either choose to live with fear, or we can choose to live in the future with courage and compassion. And I think that sort of aligns with what you're saying.
Thank you so much.
It's a choice. In that sense, he suggests it's a choice.
Absolutely. Thanks so much.
You're welcome. Thank you for the question.
All righty. Who else? Thank you, Em. Towards the front here.
Hi, my name's Monica. Thank you for coming to our book club. The book is fantastic and I loved it. And the question is not so much based around the book, but themes in the book. So reading what the refugees go through in detention is heartbreaking. Sorry. And I know I can Google, but there's so many charities out there and it's so overwhelming to try and decide where to donate and what will actually help. So do you have any, or are you aware of any through your research, charities that are actually making a difference, that someone like me that can't really do a lot but can contribute to these charities to help?
Yeah, that's a really beautiful question. Thank you. So because of my own professional background, I have a natural gravitation towards charities that work in that justice space, and RACS does a great job. RACS, the I can't remember, actually, my brain is having a perimenopausal moment where I cannot decipher the acronym for you. But RACS is the main refugee legal organisation that I personally think is fantastic and support. And as I mentioned before, the Rural Australians for Refugees are tremendously effective. I had this look of confusion on my face because I'm like, wow, you guys really get shit done. And they're actually mostly grandmas. And more power to the grandmothers and the nanas. You know, it's the nanas who are often leading Aboriginal activism. They are very, very strategic, very comprehensive, really good at community mobilization. And so those are the two that I spend a lot of time and thought with and support, I personally.
Thank you. I will look into them. Thank you for that.
Yeah, no worries.
I'll pop those into the Facebook group. I'll include some links for you.
And can I just add in there, on a local level, there's a group called CARAD, and CARAD, and they just really pragmatic on the ground, making sure refugee people have homes, have enough food, and they're really awesome people who are part of that board and that committee. So just on a Perth-based one, that's a really, really helpful one to know. Sorry to interrupt.
No, that's great.
Alrighty, anyone else have any questions for Shankari? No? Don't think I can see any more arms. Making sure there's no one waving. Okay. Oh, thank you, Em. I better put that back on. Alright. Whoops. There we go. Alrighty. Well, I think that just about wraps us up then. Thank you so, so much for joining us, especially on your weekend away, or your week away.
No, Aaron understands. My husband understands.
Well, I hope he enjoyed his film. And thank you so much. We are eager to see what comes next from you. We know that, I think I can say, because I think it was up on your website, that you've got another book out early next year.
Yes, this is an old thriller that I wrote, which has it's in Audible form at the moment, and it'll get published by Ultimo in January next year.
Excellent, because Ultimo are the best and we love them.
We do.
Yes.
So much.
But yes, so that one will, another thriller from Shankari, so that one will be out early next year. Don't worry, we'll be getting plenty of copies. And yeah, we look forward to seeing what else comes from you. Thank you so much for joining us again. I think this is the biggest turnout we've had all year. So thank you so much.
Oh,
thank
you're
you to
so
everyone
welcome
for coming.
Thank you for giving up your evening and for reading the book and for having me today. It's been such a lovely conversation.
Alrighty. Bye, Shankari.
See you guys. Thank you.
They're all waving. Oh, thank you so much, everyone, for coming and for all your incredible, thoughtful questions. I'll make sure that I link some stuff onto the Facebook page, just so it's nice and easy for you to access. I will redact that little bit. I'll do a spoiler warning on the recording, and that one will come out in a couple of weeks. It'll come out a week before the next one. I do have copies of Safe Haven and also Shankari's previous title, which won the Miles Franklin, The Chai Time at Cinnamon Gardens. I've got a couple of those there. And then I also have next month's book club, which is called Shadow of the Winter Robin, and that is by Louise Walhuta, a Perth author, who will be joining us in person next month, which is very exciting. So you guys can get some signatures. So last Wednesday of the month, same time, same place. Drinks, as you know. I will try and if we get this many people, I'll need to make sure I explore some more seating options. Thank you so much, everyone.